I have a real pleasure here to introduce today's guest. President of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, Kate Forbes. Kate asked me to truncate her biography, which I'm going to try and, no, it's not, I got to do a little more than that. You're in for a real treat. Kate is a humanitarian leader with more than 40 years of experience with the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. Since joining the Red Cross in 1981, she's traveled across the country and around the world to support philanthropic actions. At the IFRC, Kate most recently served as chairman of the organization's Audit and Risk Commission before being elevated to the presidency. Prior to this, she was the chief financial officer of Electric Applications Incorporated, and in a volunteer capacity, she served as chairman of the American Lung Association, a member of the Arizona State University Foundation Board of Directors, chairman of the PSI Audit Committee, and a variety of local and national boards. Kate is the recipient of numerous awards, which I will not read because she is glaring at me. Suffice it to say, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, what we call the IFRC, it is the world's largest humanitarian network. The IFRC supports Red Cross and Red Crescent actions in more than 191 countries, bringing together more than 17 million volunteers for the good of humanity. And I think it's important to note that one of those volunteers is Kate Forbes. That makes this talk, I think, even more special. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kate Forbes.
Thank you for that introduction. Before I do my prepared remarks, I was telling this story. Last night, someone said to me, who's the most important person, famous person you've met in your role? And I thought for a moment, and I said, well, I got to meet, Pope Francis, which was, a pretty well-known guy. And a handful of us were there, and it was because the movement was being thanked for the work we do on migration globally. And I must admit, I was pretty proud of myself. My mother had gone to Creighton. It was, Jesuits formed so much of my life's belief. We get there, and I go to meet him, and I'm thinking he's going to say something like, oh, thank you for doing all these, like this kind of stuff. And instead he looked straight in the eye. He said, you know you can do more, right? So here I am in Indianapolis. So anyhow, really, thank you so much for your kind invitation today. It truly is a pleasure to be with you in a forum where leaders from business, academia, and public life come together to discuss the issues shaping our world. I want to acknowledge the American Red Cross, a proud member of this club, and a very valued and respected member of our Red Cross and Red Crescent family. As was mentioned, I'm proud, having been a volunteer for the American Red Cross for 44 years. Thanks to that amazing and enriching experience, today I do serve as president of the Red Cross, Red Crescent National Societies, the IFRC for short. It is the world's largest humanitarian network. We represent 191 countries. We're composed of 17 million volunteers and have a collective budget of over $1.5 billion a year. Many of you know the Red Cross primarily through blood services, disasters response, or service to military families. But at the heart of everything we do are 7 fundamental principles that guide our decisions, our conduct, and our ability to help people, impartiality, an ability to help people during moments of crisis. Our principles are humanity, that every person has dignity and worth. Impartiality, that we respond based on need alone. Neutrality and independence, that our aid must not become a tool of politics. voluntary service, that our work is not driven by profit, but by compassion, unity, that one Red Cross or Red Crescent in every country is open to all, and universality, that we are a global network where all 191 national societies support each other. These principles are not abstract terms. They were born from suffering, written in the shadow of world wars and the devastation of millions of lives. They allow all our National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies to deliver life-saving support in conflict, natural disasters, climate emergencies, and other humanitarian crises with trust, legitimacy, and universal access. And today, as artificial intelligence transforms nearly every sector represented in this room, these humanitarian principles take on new relevance. We find ourselves at a turning point in humanitarian action, an era defined not only by protracted crisis, intensifying disasters, and deepening inequalities, but also extraordinary technological advancement. Among the most transformative of these technologies is artificial intelligence. The potential of artificial intelligence to help or harm depends entirely on how we shape and govern it. This is why our humanitarian principles matter in this discussion. They are our moral compass for navigating a world where machines can make predictions, influence decisions, and shape outcomes. Artificial intelligence is already reshaping the way we anticipate, respond to, and recover from crisis, accelerating disaster mapping, redefining early warning systems, and informing program design. But amid this promise lies a deeper question. Can the solutions offered by artificial intelligence truly uphold the humanitarian principles that have guided our work for over 160 years? Or, unguided, will it quietly erode the very ethics we stand for? And therefore, how must we shape or create artificial intelligence tools to be guided by our humanitarian principles? This is not a technical question. It's a moral one. And it demands that we look at each of our principles considering this new reality. The principle of humanity calls on us to prevent and alleviate suffering wherever it's found, to protect life and health, and to ensure respect for the individual. It is the core of our movement. When used wisely, artificial intelligence can support this imperative. For example, our Early Warning for All initiative is delivering advanced alerts for tropical cyclones and flash floods in several pilot countries, including India, Fiji, and Kenya. In Ethiopia, we're using flood risk mapping. It helps us to identify areas where the vulnerable will be impacted by flooding, so people can be relocated before the disaster begins and to prevent loss of life. The German Red Cross and the Philippines Red Cross, with the support of the Netherlands Red Cross, have developed the Typhoon Trigger Model, a mechanism for pre-assessing the danger level for incoming typhoons. Predictive models like these are now helping us foresee displacement patterns, disease outbreaks, enabling earlier interventions and saving lives. Yet, humanity and humanitarian impact is more than forecasts and the sum of data points. It's a commitment to dignity, empathy, and care. artificial intelligence must never become a cold substitute for human compassion. It should enhance, not replace, our ability to understand the unique stories, aspirations, fears, and strengths of the people we serve. Humanity means keeping people at the center of everything we do. Artificial intelligence, designed with human-centered methodologies and based on community engagement, is necessary to support our principles. Impartiality demands that we help those most in need without discrimination, ensuring fairness regardless of race, gender, religion, nationality, or political opinion. This principle can be directly challenged by algorithms' biases. Artificial intelligence systems are only as good as their underlying design and the data they learn from. As we know, humanitarian data is often incomplete, inconsistent, and historically biased. If these flaws go unexamined, artificial intelligence may unintentionally reinforce the very inequities we strive to eliminate. In partnership with NESCA UK and the UK Humanitarian Innovation Hub, the Cameroon Red Cross and Nepal Red Cross have explored how to create participatory artificial intelligence tools guided by our principles. These prototypes integrate community feedback into aid delivery and into predicting non-food item distribution. If past aid distribution disproportionately neglects certain ethnic groups, an artificial intelligence model trained on that data may repeat the exclusion, quietly, invisibly, and without any accountability. We have both the opportunity and the responsibility to use artificial intelligence tools to collaborate and communicate across borders and languages without discrimination. We must ask, who is being seen by the system? Who is being erased? And how can we correct these blind spots? Impartiality demands rigorous audits, inclusive design, diverse data sets, and human oversight to ensure that no one is left behind, not by accident, not by design, and not by an algorithm. Our neutrality is essential to gaining access to politically sensitive environments. Yet many artificial intelligence systems are developed by private companies or governments with their own interests at heart. If humanitarian actors uncritically adopt these tools, we risk embedding political, commercial, or ideological bias in our operations, however unintentional. To preserve neutrality, we must critically assess the provenance of our technology. Who developed them? For what purpose? Are there geopolitical or commercial influences that constitute a threat to our principles of neutrality? With extensive input, the British Red Cross approved a comprehensive artificial intelligence policy in December of 2024 to guide their evaluation and use of artificial intelligence. Additionally, the Danish Red Cross and the Canadian Red Cross have implemented artificial intelligence guidelines, making trust and safety paramount in selecting and using intelligence tools. Now, neutrality is not about staying silent. I'm going to repeat that because people don't often believe that. Neutrality is not about staying silent. It's about staying principled, and that includes asking hard questions about the technology we adopt. Independence in our own digitally entangled world requires making decisions based on needs alone, not on external agendas. But as we increasingly rely on artificial intelligence tools built by others, our independence is being tested. When a machine suggests who should receive aid, how do we ensure that these decisions are grounded in our mandate and our values? In this pursuit, the Norwegian Red Cross has tested a local artificial intelligence model to support learning and volunteer needs. And the Lebanese Red Cross is piloting a secure, non-public, local artificial intelligence model to assist in their work. We must resist the temptation to outsource judgments to algorithms. Humanitarians, not machines, must be the final arbitrators of need, priority, and assistance. But this requires investing in in-house expertise, ethical review, and decision-making safeguards that reinforce and do not replace our independence. The principle of voluntary service affirms that our work is not driven by profit, but by a commitment to others. Volunteers equipped with artificial intelligence tools can enhance our reach and our efficiency. The French Red Cross is piloting assistance to volunteers by using artificial intelligence tools to support their learning outcomes. However, again, any such shift in volunteering must be guided by our principles. It must also reflect the dignity of the individuals we assist, who must be treated not as passive recipients of aid, but as agents with rights, including the right to consent. In this digital era, technology access and data are currency. Refugees fleeing violence or families displaced by disasters may be asked to share sensitive personal information. But in many cases, consent is not fully informed. It is given under duress, in languages people do not understand, and not knowing how the information will actually be used. Aid must never come at the cost of privacy or dignity. Sometimes, trust may demand choosing a less technological solution to a situation. Respecting this principle means upholding privacy, practicing data minimalization, and ensuring that people know how and where their information is used, and they have the right to refuse or revoke that use in simple and transparent ways. Unity and universality call on us to act as one global humanitarian family, bound by a shared purpose. As artificial intelligence becomes more embedded in our operations, these principles take on new relevance. Artificial intelligence development must not be limited to a handful of powerful actors or technologically advanced societies. We must foster digital solidarity, ensuring that all national Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, regardless of size or location, can access, understand, and shape the use of artificial intelligence in humanitarian work. To this end, the Australian Red Cross partners with local universities to guide work on automated decision-making tools. Additionally, the Japanese Red Cross collaborates with hospitals, researchers, and businesses on remote assessments of artificial intelligence. We must speak with one voice to uphold the ethical standards across different contexts. Fragmented approaches weaken trust. Unified ones reinforce our legitimacy. Finally, we must never forget the core ethical tenet of humanitarian work: do no harm. In the age of artificial intelligence, this means asking really difficult questions. Is this technology truly necessary? Does it add value or does it risk harm? Are affected communities meaningfully consulted in the design of the use of artificial intelligence tools? Can people contest, correct, or refuse decisions made by machines? Sometimes the most principled choice may not be to deploy artificial intelligence at all. Responsible restraint is not a failure of innovation. It is the highest expression of ethical leadership. Artificial intelligence can become a powerful ally in humanitarian work, but only if it's rooted in the use of our principles. In the IFRC network, we are committed to responsible innovation, but responsibility cannot be delegated to tech companies, donors, or policymakers. It remains our duty, and it begins by placing people, not systems, at the center of our humanitarian mission. The people we serve are not data sets, inputs, or probabilities. They are human beings with dignity, agency, and rights. As leaders in business, finance, technology, and civic life, you play an important role in shaping how artificial intelligence will influence our society and our humanitarian work. The future of artificial intelligence and its impact on humanity is not predetermined. It will be shaped by the choices we make today. So I invite you to partner with us in 3 concrete ways. First, champion ethical and responsible artificial intelligence. Help ensure that innovations you and your companies are working on respect dignity, reduce harm, and avoid reinforcing inequities. Second, invest in technologies that serve people, not just markets. We need partners who understand that innovation should be safe, inclusive, and community-centered, always prioritizing the human impact. Third, build a culture of digital solidarity. Artificial intelligence should not deepen the divide between those who have access and those who do not. As business leaders, you can help ensure that smaller organizations, underserved communities, and local responders have access to the tools, knowledge, and infrastructure needed to benefit the technological changes we are all facing. The tools of the digital age are very powerful. They can make our humanitarian work faster, more efficient, perhaps even more accurate. But they cannot make us more humane. That choice is always ours. By working together across humanitarian and academic and private sectors, we can build a future where technology elevates humanity and never diminishes it. That's the challenge between all of us. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you, Kate, for that really thoughtful conversation. I thought before we begin, and please feel free to submit questions and send them up, and someone will come get them. Maybe for the group here, Kate, you could give some context to your work. What do you do exactly? And where do you do it? It's on. It's already on.
It's on?
Yeah.
Okay. What do I do exactly? Well, I worry a lot. Where I do it? Okay, my home is Phoenix, Arizona, and Santa Fe, New Mexico, but now I split my time between Geneva and this year, 28 countries that I visited. And, I chair the board, which is a 30-person board, large board, 5 from all of our 5 members from each of our regions, and 5 vice presidents. But my real concentration really is to try to ensure that, as I said in my remarks, that aid gets to the most vulnerable, that people understand what we're doing, that our principles are at the core of all of our decision making from that standpoint. And I mean, it's a big burden. I represent 17 million volunteers and who do remarkable work around the world. It's unbelievable what we get accomplished.
So leading 191 Red Cross societies, you must carry around thousands of stories. As you go into places that most of us only see on television, what are the things that you walk away from?
So I was fortunate to be sitting with the consulate from Mexico at my table, so I would like to tell a story about a volunteer in Mexico City. One of the things I did early on in my presidency was to go through the Darien Gap. That's 100 miles worth of jungle that people are fleeing, usually from Colombia and Venezuela, come up through Central America into Panama. And we were standing at the end of that, seeing what was happening. I went on up to Mexico City, and I met a young woman who was in her 30s, I'm guessing late 20s, 30s, and she was in charge of small children, I'll get too emotional, who often had lost parents or lost everything coming through the gap. They're misled as to what needs to happen, and they weren't speaking. And we needed to have these children tell us things. And she came up with a program, I don't know if many of you remember, sock puppets. And they said, we're going to make you a friend that you can talk to and take with you as you go on to your next journey. And they did that, and for the first time, many of these children talked and told us their stories so we could help them. This was a program created by a volunteer who realized these children under the age of 5, we needed to know more, but they had been so mistreated by the world already in their short time that to have this puppet that they could take friend with them gave us the opportunity to know what they were doing. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Another kind of story that I tell is that I went to Saudi Arabia, and we had a volunteer who had completely lost their eyesight and decided that shouldn't be a reason why we can't teach first aid to everybody. So long story short, he developed a first aid course in Braille, and I met a woman who was able to save her 7-month-old child from choking to death because she had taken this first aid course. And I often think that child may be the one who finds the cure for AIDS or writes the next novel. But it was just amazing from a positive side. Probably two of the most memorable things that I've seen was went to Cox's Bazar, which is in the tip of Bangladesh. It holds 2 million refugees from Myanmar who have no place to go. They can't go home. No country wants them. Quite frankly, I feel like I have now been to hell and seen it. I mean, I just cannot begin to describe what it's like. The first 2 women I met asked me if I could help find their children because the UN had cut the food allocation down, money to buy it. They couldn't feed everyone, so they literally had sold their 2 youngest boys. Under the guise they were told that they would send money back. Well, they were either sold for sex trafficking to become child soldiers, and of course we had no way to find them. But in the midst of all that, these women, they subsequently had a conversation, had formed a volunteer thing where they had learned first aid and were administering first aid in this camp. So in the middle of this horrific environment, it was the Red Crescent, Red Cross movement that gave them purpose and hope and a way to go forward. I mean, just incredible. So I can tell you on some of the things I've done. You asked what I do. I mean, I went back and went to the UN and met with 40 ambassadors, and not just because of me, but because of our organization, we were able to increase food allocation. So part of the job is recognizing issues, humanitarian issues, and coming up with solutions.
Well, that's a good segue. One of the questions from the audience is how has the loss of funding from organizations like USAID impacted the work of the international humanitarian movement and the Red Cross in particular?
It's been a very difficult year. Depending on how you look at USAID, was 40 to 60% of all humanitarian aid in the world. And although we had inklings that this might happen, that USAID would be cease, we had no idea it would just stop overnight, which gave us no time to really recover. I mean, we vaccinate half the children in the world by the Red Cross, Red Crescent societies. Medical, and it was devastating. Fortunately, I think we're pretty well managed. We had reserves that we were able to do, but it takes a while to reestablish. You're all business people. You don't replace a supply chain overnight. And so it was really, quite frankly, hundreds of thousands of people have died. It has been gut-wrenching. Fortunately, we're having other governments step up. We're having other foundations, but you don't replace 60% of the funding. So it has been a very difficult problem to resolve. The other thing, I think I met somebody who's a banker, your vice chair's a banker. We've had terrible currency risks. They owed us $140 million, so they were going to pay us in dollars, but the Swiss franc is stronger. Anyway, so we got a 25% haircut because the US dollars lost money. So not only did we lose the funding, the money we were reimbursed for things in the past wasn't as much. So it just makes us be more determined and to reach out to different donors and to tell our stories of the difference we really make.
On the way over here, we were just talking about the reality of volunteering for the Red Cross in most parts of the world. There's many folks here who've been touched, or maybe they're volunteers now with the Red Cross, but as the leader of this movement, what worries you the most about your volunteers, the workforce, and their safety?
Yeah. When I took this job, I anticipated a lot of things. I'd been volunteering at the international level for 17 years, so I kind of thought I had it figured out, which, what do they say? Man plans, God laughs. Unfortunately, the hardest thing I've had to do, this year I've written 38 condolence letters where volunteers have been killed in the line of duty. Whether they be in Sudan and they were pulled out of one of our vehicles and just shot on the side of the road. The feeling being that if we'll kill Red Cross, Red Crescenters, we'll kill anybody. Or the atrocities when I was in Israel and I saw who'd run the clinic on October 7th was pulled out of the clinic, clearly armed, vested, and was shot. Or we had 9 ambulance drivers pulled out of theirs in Gaza this year and shot. So one of my big passions is to really work with governments. Everywhere I go, I meet with the presidents. When I go to the UN, I was at the the General Assembly of the UN speaking, is to remember what the emblem means. Because we can only do our work if we have a safe environment, if the emblem's respected. So what I worry about is the safety of those 17 million volunteers. And if they're not there, what will happen to the literally hundreds of millions of people we serve? So first, the first priority has got to be we can continue to be there and I can continue to protect the volunteers.
There's a question here about migration. As someone who has seen a lot of migration and its effects, what's something that the audience here should understand about migration from your perspective?
See, I'm never supposed to be political. You guys are making it hard for me. I think what we need to understand is really that most people don't want to leave home. If they're leaving home, there's a reason. And we're trying very hard at the Red Cross and Red National Societies to look at the core problems. What can we do at the countries where they're from or located to keep them there? And, is it that there's not enough livelihood work? Is it not safe? There's not enough food, but really try to look at the core reasons so the migration doesn't happen, because clearly it rarely has a happy ending with the ones we're talking about. So we try to balance giving aid along the route as well as working closely with governments to see if we can ensure them having places. So I guess I wish I could take everyone and you would stand at the end of the Darien Gap and you meet who's coming out. These are people who truly are trying for a better life. I met a 17-year-old boy with his younger brother who was about 10. And I kept thinking, how desperate must their parents be that they essentially sold them to a coyote to get through the Darien Gap to not know what's going to happen to them. I mean, I would have taken them home in the overhead if there was a way I could have. I mean, and we need to just turn down the rhetoric, look at these as people, as I mentioned in my speech, and how do we ensure that everyone has a safe place to live and enough to eat? It's pretty basic.
Your comments really sparked a lot of conversation in the cards here around artificial intelligence and the use of technology. There is a push-pull. Arguably, the use of AI would improve efficiency, make it easier to do things. How are you grappling with that versus the risks you've described?
Well, that's really one of the, I hate to say fun thing, one of the interesting things, intellectual things I'm getting to do is think about this AI. And we know for us to be able to predict where floods are going to be so we can move people behind, we're using a lot where climate's changing and relocating people. The Japanese who run most of the hospital, Japanese Red Cross, are using it for diagnostic purposes. I mean, amazing from that. But what we don't want to do is map it to tell us where you're going to need aid completely and what aid you need, because it's only as good as the information it has. And lots of times we don't really know who really needs and what they need if we don't go there and ask. The beauty of the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement is we are at the last mile. We have over 200,000 locations globally. So we do know the communities, and they know what they need better than we know what they need. And if we're building decision-making in Europe, for somebody who lives in the Pacific Islands, having been there, I can tell you we really don't have a grasp of what it is. So we have to balance it and just constantly ask the questions I said. You know, is this going to create more inequalities, inequities, or less? But some of it's really helped. I mean, the fact that we can get aid and do assessments faster, that's been brilliant, absolutely. And on logistics, phenomenally good. So,
in an era of arguably finite and scarce resources, Red Cross societies are making triage decisions sort of all the time about who they can serve, how many they can serve. Do you have observations from your experiences in the field where you've seen these sort of choices, and how are national societies reconciling with this?
I think maybe a good, when I went to Turkey after the earthquake, historically we have just given aid, and we now have started a livelihood program where we replace a small business, we'll replace their initial inventory so they can continue on. I say that because they'll be less likely to need us in the future. We're also trying to be, it's very hard to get donors to fund this, anticipatory. If we can move people before they lose everything, relocate them, you know, if we can help them change building codes so things don't fall down in an earthquake, and help from that stamp, that helps us minimize stock. But we don't begin to have the funding we truly need to address all the issues. And what I didn't anticipate was, you know, that these crises would continue. We didn't think what was happening in the Middle East would continue on, Sudan, Ukraine, Russia, that we've just not seen these protracted 4, 5, 6 year things that, and they lose the interest with the public, but still people are done. So you're right, it's a challenge. It's a constant reassessment, operational reassessment all the time of where will we have the greatest impact, where will we make a difference, and hopefully where can we, if we take certain actions, we won't be needed in that way again.
Kate, I think humanitarianism creates strange bedfellows. And for the audience here, amidst global conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, Ukraine, Russia, can you describe a little bit about how Red Cross societies work across and through those situations?
Oftentimes, even though, you know, all of our national societies are to be independent from the national governments, let's all be realists. Everyone's impacted by who's your government is, and especially the ones that you named. I think the only functioning agreement, cooperation agreement, if you go to between Israel and Palestine, is our ambulance services that go back and forth and help. I was on a call with them just last Friday. There's nowhere else that's happening, that we have the forum. And same thing in Russia and Ukraine, where we're able to coordinate a response. Just last year, we had our international conference where every government you mentioned, I mean, everybody from the Taliban were there, from, Afghanistan to Sudanese, the Ethiopians were there. So we were all in the same room. We passed a whole series of humanitarian commitments that are being upheld. So it's just a very unique place that somehow something happens, that people sit and we actually work on humanitarian issues. So we don't publicize it to a great deal, but oftentimes we are the safe space where people, both sides of the conflict, can come together and help the most vulnerable, who we usually are, quite frankly, the elderly, women, and children. They're impacted the greatest and have the least voice in what's happening to them.
You're in a unique position to answer this audience-inspired question here, which is that businesses sometimes think nonprofits are, quote, doing it wrong. As a business leader who's now a nonprofit leader, how do you think about the ways in which the business community can inform nonprofit work and perhaps maybe shouldn't be informing nonprofit work?
Well, no one has a corner in doing it wrong. I mean, come on. I mean, both sides, Well, I used to always say, when I was really active in the American Red Cross, hey, look, if we can make money at it, it's America, somebody be making money at it, right? But, it's so different from an international perspective, in that the elephant that's in the room that you don't see is culture. And if you don't address that first, you're not going to be able to do anything else. And especially we Americans, and I'm speaking about myself, we come in and we think, we come from the greatest country, we have all the solutions and whatever, and we don't stop and listen enough to understand how people are making the decisions they're making and why, from that standpoint. I think businesses can, especially now with technology, doing such a huge impact on all of us, not profit, nonprofit. That's why I talked about that in my speech. I think if they can help, as I said in my remarks, help us with adopting artificial intelligence in an appropriate way, that'll be very helpful. And just, 17 million volunteers. I always say to everybody I meet who's a volunteer, what do you do in your other life? There are two lives, and so you bring your expertise. So clearly, funding's part of it, but more, I think it's more understanding our culture, having support our volunteers, and being a voice in the community to ensure that we're doing the things we should be doing in the right priority with the right resources.
Kate, our last question before we wrap up. If you could rewrite one common misconception that you hear about humanitarian aid and the purpose it serves in our world, what might that be?
I think when we all went through what we went through in January this year, I kept hearing this doesn't make any difference. It's all wasted, nobody cares. And I will tell you one of my stories from USAID. I went to the Horn of Africa, and where famine is just a huge issue for a variety of reasons, geopolitical, climate, culture, just, and again, women and children who are impacted. And they had a line of children who were about 18 months old, and they'd come up and they would measure their arm. If the arm was too small, they didn't get food because they were already going to die. If the arm was, within a certain parameter, we knew we could save them. They got food supplement. If their arm was a bit bigger, they weren't hungry enough, so we couldn't give them aid. I mean, I went home to Geneva, went back to Geneva and called USAID and explained. I said, we have the ability to do this. We have the ability. We just need the food supplements, to do it. And, they did. And so the misconception is we do make a difference. We change people's lives. We have unseen geopolitical impacts. If they have a place to go home to, if they aren't sick, they're going to stay where they are. They want to thrive. We all want the same thing. Every mother I have met, now I've been to over 60 countries in my 2 years, 28 this year. I didn't quite break the record from last. The mothers want the same things. They want their kids to be safe. They want a place to live in. They want enough food. It's not complicated. And we as humanitarians, we can make that difference. And if that happens, as I said in my story about the woman who saved her 7-month-old, we don't know what that child will grow up to be. I mean, that could be the solution. So I think the misconception is we don't make a difference. We make a difference. You make a difference in your own community and our global community.
Kate Forbes, President of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, everyone. Happy holidays to you and your families. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.